I'd never considered doing film reviews until I found myself watching Super 8, and apparently being the only person in the world who thought that it was rubbish. I was walking down a street in London. It was a warm August evening, everything seemed right with the world as I meandered home from work. Of course, these were the nights of the London riots, and the people of Britain were coming out in full force for a dress rehearsal of the London Olympics. That is to say, congested. Little did I know at the time, but the whole kerfuffle had flared up over a particularly heated argument regarding a Kit Kat McFlurry. Being pinned off at the front of me by rioters, I turned the street and started to head back, only to find that I'd been cut off by police heading in the opposite direction. Institutional racism, after all, has a new and bleaker meaning when you are of a completely different species. My only actual escape at that stage was a dark alley or the Wilkes Film Theatre. I'm not particularly partial to summer releases, but turning around all I saw was a Google Street View car getting laid into, which should result in some interesting directions for future visitors, and, like a quadruple amputee, I reasoned I had nothing to lose. And besides, being a toucan, a punch in the nose can be potentially fatal. Initially, when I left the theatre in a smog of tear gas, I felt like I'd had a good experience. After all, fleeing for your life being followed by a slightly dry sausage roll will make the slightly dry sausage roll look pretty awesome. But after the adrenaline had died down, I had time to reflect on it and realised that I had been hoodwinked. Actually, what I had seen was the beginning third of a good movie welded onto the back of E.T. It was upsetting, like seeing the front end of a Lotus Elise being crudely welded onto a cow. I guess I should have seen the signs when I saw J.J. Abrams was in the titles with Steven Spielberg, which is like seeing Michael Cera and Jesse Eisenberg star alongside each other. It seemed like Abrams and Spielberg were trying to out-Spielberg each other. Essentially, the experience is similar to watching a computer divide by zero. The story follows Jo Lam, a young protagonist whose mum gets Disneyed in the opening credits. We never see her or know her, but they do provide a small soliloquy in an attempt to emotionally blackmail us into caring. I certainly liked him a lot more than the people looting the Salvation Army next door, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, killing a character off screen without letting us get to know her meant that she amounted to the square root of who cares. It also spelt out at the beginning that they had put as much thought, care and attention into the initial script as Fox News put into Guantanamo Bay. Then came the much touted train wreck. Not the rest of the film, though that does apply, but the train crashed 10 minutes in. It was, admittedly, very impressive, but then what isn't when physics clocks off early for the day? Let's watch this and see if you buy it. In the ancient battle of Hot Wheels vs. Train, who will win? A small car managed to stop a train and explode it spectacularly. The people aboard the train are presumably killed, while the man in the 1950s pickup survives with only minor lacerations. It is a little known fact that before the invention of airbags was the pilot locating orientation, or plot, device, which could make you survive anything as fatal as death itself. People used to keep them cool in this era, keeping them in their fridges in case geriatric actors were attempting to survive a nuclear bomb or franchisicide. I found it pretty funny that this obvious tin can managed to do more damage than another train at equal speed. Like the old equation, if a train travels from Phoenix at 100 miles an hour carrying 14 tons of tar and explosive, and another leaves Chicago at 50 miles an hour carrying feathers, how hilarious is the outcome? I was also surprised that a military train wasn't travelling under escort, or that the cargo, a pissed-off battery-farmed alien, and all his stuff, needed relocating in the first place. At this stage I was still impressed at how they managed to turn off physics, so when they turned them back on again I hardly even noticed the totally unrealistic way the kids reacted to finding a body of one of their teachers in the wreckage. Responses like, "Wow, you should be splattered all over the place, like a cross between pomegranate and dynamite, a combination I like to call pomegranomite." Okay, so I'm exaggerating, but it is unrealistic. Instead they say, "Is that him?" The use of an anaphoric reference here is totally redundant, because he hadn't just been referenced in conversation. But yes, the blowy-uppy stuff was quite impressive. After that, it was pretty much just Stand By Me crossed with E.T., as done by J.J. Abrams. Please can someone tell that man that Lost is finished, and that the payoff was about as worthy as shares in Goldman Sachs, and that Lost was an unequivocal disappointment. What was more guiling about that particular franchise was the fact that I was reading some of the fan sites, and they came up with far better closing ideas than the actual producers did. The problem was that they were so in love with themselves that they just couldn't roll with it. I yawned through the cliches of the rest of the movie. As I say, the characters were genuinely likeable, it was just that the situation they had been put in by the director was the real problem. Father and son conflict over devil. Boy meets girl but his shoes shite. Boy fights with friend because they like the girl. I know. Let's have other female characters to show that the girl in this movie isn't just a trophy for the boys to win. Instead, she was just there to be lusted after, kidnapped and generally objectified as everyone lost energy for this film and the riots outside died down. I think it finally lost its thread when the shy coming-of-age child goes from being an awkward, believable and highly likeable teenager to leading an infiltration on an alien base. Or how he's totally unfazed and almost as forgiving as Jesus when he witnesses two of his neighbours get splattered against the wall like the alien is checking if the spaghetti's done. Then there is the problem with Operation Walking Distance. It's spoken with these shadowy tones. It even gets people who know about it to get arrested at gunpoint and put in jail. By the way, that's everyone, though only one of them is stupid enough to get caught knowing about it. And what actually is it? The army get a flamethrower and gas masks and start an easily manageable blaze in order to evacuate the town. I'm confused. How is this a secret? You can start a forest fire anytime. You can easily deal with it. It's what the fire service is for. Why, when you've got a military who is there, you can just evacuate them? Now, anyone would have thought that all the stuff going missing would have been reason enough. And by stuff, I mean people. And the train getting mashed up at the beginning could be considered worth their attention, as the army clearly isn't in the habit of explaining things in this movie. It's just overlooked, though, for some reason. It's about the 2/3 mark, where Joe Lamb Deus Ex Machina's courage out of air and suddenly becomes a gutsy protagonist. Why? I suppose because girls make you do stupid things. But suddenly he's taking the leader role, which he doesn't have at the beginning. It's actually owned by the fat kid. But the thing is that the fat kid can't be the protagonist, because otherwise, what kind of message is that sending to the kids? To conclude, I actually found it wobbly. It started out with a lot of promise of development, but the characters are bland, forgettable, or stolen from other films. The script is riddled with cliches, so cliched that it makes a regular cliche look striking and original, and it's just so predictable from the 30-minute mark. It could have gone anywhere, like the Lotus Cow abomination. It could have been genuinely touching, but it feels like it was just rushed out in half an hour so they could start blowing stuff up and taking pictures of light glare like from E.T. It generally got favourable reviews, and I think that's because it throws out plot points so much that they can't be developed properly, and it gives the illusion of emotional depth. Actually, when you step back and look at what actually happens, Joe plucks up chivalry out of nowhere, being granted guts from the Deus Ex Machina machine. We never actually learn anything about the mother other than that they were close. Again, not seen, don't know, don't care. Finally, I just didn't find it believable. Yes, I know it's science fiction, but there still has to be a level of believability in the characters. After all, a 12-year-old boy would never go against every authority figure in their society just for a bit of fun. Oh, bum. I left the theatre in the warm evening glow of a torched Fiat Punto, watching kids merrily caper through the street with stolen goods. For all of my ranting in the lobby about lacking realism of a young boy suddenly leading the charge against an unknown hostile adversary, I actually realised that the real world had been doing the exact same, just outside. Children had been having an eventful and law-breaking summer, the same as Joe Lamb in Super 8. However, I paused to think, those children would actually end up in jail for ripping off other people's goods. Now it's time for my moment of reflection. I recently found out that Justin Bieber had released an autobiography, which filled me with a glimmer of hope. Autobiographies, after all, are the whole story, so maybe it was a subtle way of telling us that he had a mortal sickness, or was Benjamin buttoning his way out of existence.